All right, today we are jumping straight into some pretty powerful source material. Think of it as a kind of field guide, one that gives these really stark, direct warnings about the nature of narcissistic abuse. And this isn't just about someone behaving badly. The text describes a very calculated playbook. So let's get right to it. Okay, let's just dive right in with this, because this opening quote from our source, it really sets a chilling stage. This isn't about random outbursts or unintentional cruelty. The key word here, the one that changes everything, is deliberate. It suggests this whole process of identifying what makes you strong, what makes you you, and then systematically going after those very qualities. This is really our starting point for understanding the entire dynamic. And that brings us to our first section, the calculated takedown. The source material paints a picture of a very methodical process. It's designed specifically to take a person from a place of strength to a state of complete surrender.
So how does this actually work? Well, the source breaks the strategy down into 3 distinct steps. First, it starts by targeting someone strong. Then that person is systematically cornered. Escape routes are cut off, support systems are isolated, until, as the text puts it, all psychological defenses collapse. It's described as nothing less than a total siege on a person's entire being.
But why? What's the end game here? The source is very clear that the goal is to prove a hypothesis, but it's a false one. The whole objective is to make the victim truly believe, deep down in their core, that they are inherently weak and bad. It's about completely rewriting their reality through years and years of degradation. Now, to make that happen, to get someone to believe that false reality, a very specific environment has to be created. And that brings us to our next section, how a thick psychological fog is manufactured. The source actually calls it an art of confusion. And this is the question. This is the one the source says victims are constantly, desperately asking themselves. Who is this person? Why do they do these things? The whole experience is just disorienting. And that's by design. It makes it almost impossible to see the situation for what it really is.
What's interesting is our source material actually gives us a name to anchor this feeling of disorientation, FOG. It's an acronym, and it stands for fear, obligation, and guilt. The text says these are the 3 core emotions that are carefully cultivated over years of emotional abuse, and they would keep a person trapped in that confusing haze.
And this quote, this just perfectly illustrates the heart of all that confusion. How can the person who claims to be helping you also be the very source of all your pain? The source points right to this contradiction, this performance of being a saint, a savior, a helper, while their actions are actually those of an oppressor. It's this massive mismatch that makes the FOG so incredibly dense and hard to see through.
So if the actions are oppressive, how are they justified? How does that work?
Well, let's explore the distorted reasoning the source says a narcissist uses. It's like a world built entirely on excuses that are there to mask the true motivations. Look at the huge gap here between the public excuse and the private truth. The source gives this example, the claim of some kind of righteous discipline for disobeying God. But the text is explicit. The real, unconfessed reason is often something totally different, rooted in their own past trauma and neglect, something that will never, ever be admitted.
And the source outlines several of these blame-shifting tactics. And you start to see a pattern here, right? Your illness is used as the cause for your supposed bad actions, while their illness becomes the convenient excuse for their abusive actions. See how that works? In both scenarios, accountability is completely wiped away, and the real reasons for what they're doing stay buried.
So this whole system of blame and justification, it's all there to support a world built on absolute control. And that's what we're going to look at now, the unwritten but rigidly enforced rules that the source says govern the entire relationship.
According to the source, you have to understand that these unspoken rules are absolute. They're not suggestions. Your success isn't really your own. It's treated like their property. Your time, it has to be devoted entirely to them, and there is zero room for error. Uncovering secrets, even by accident, will be punished, and violating any of these rules can bring on what the text calls endless punishments.
And this quote, this just brilliantly shows the kind of emotional blackmail used to enforce these rules. The source uses this incredibly powerful metaphor. Any little attempt at independence, any time that's not spent serving them, is framed as this horribly cruel act of abandonment. You're not just being independent, you are abandoning a helpless infant in the wilderness. The guilt that comes with that is just immense. You know, it's worth just pausing on this point for a second because it is so telling. The source emphasizes you don't even have to be looking for a secret. Simply stumbling upon one by accident is enough to trigger a punishment. This just reveals this obsessive, desperate need to control their image and the entire narrative. So, what happens after? What if a person manages to get out of the situation? Well, the source material makes it painfully clear that the effects are deep and they are long-lasting. So let's turn to our final section, which details the internal aftermath, the lingering invasion of this experience.
The source uses the word invaded for a very specific reason. This isn't just about remembering something bad that happened. It's a hostile takeover of your mind. The text says the image of the narcissist and their misdeeds will just appear in every thought, replaying over and over and over again.
And this mental invasion, it extends into the most private, sacred spaces. According to the source, even in moments that are supposed to be for peace and solace, like prayer or meditation, those intrusive memories of the abuse will just keep surfacing. And finally, the invasion reaches the subconscious. The source concludes this chilling sequence by stating that even your dreams will be invaded. There is no escape, because the trauma embeds itself into every single layer of a person's consciousness.
And so we end with this question. And it really, truly captures the core dilemma that's presented in our source material today. It pulls together everything we've looked at: the deception, the confusion, the control, the deep psychological impact. It's a question that leaves us thinking about the monumental, almost impossible challenge of healing, of trying to find the truth after being lost for so long in the fog.